Greetings. My name's Mark Orang. I'm publisher of the Conway Daily Sun, and my guest today is George Epstein. George, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So we're going to tackle cannabis and development.
Okay.
They're not totally related, but they
You
kind
never
of are.
know.
So the cannabis, we talked about it last time, and on Thursday the full Senate is going to consider what the House and the committee in the Senate came up with. Did you know? Are you following this closely?
I am, but I'm not right on top. So you have some new information.
Well, Nathaniel Guerin is one. He's a cannabis guy, and we actually have a column. Today's Monday. No, today's what is today?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Sorry, I got back. I was away, so I lost count of days. I come back yesterday.
You're still on vacation.
I'm still on vacation. Well, my head's always on vacation, but physically I'm here. So he's got a column, and he is really cynical about this. I mean, he thinks that the governor is just playing with this thing, and the way it is now, what they're going to consider is these what they call 15 franchise agency stores. Right. And the problem with that, so there are a couple things, and there are all these little things that, so the point is that the pro-cannabis people have reasons to be against this, because there are things like you can't grow pot at home, and you can go to jail for a second public offense if you're smoking pot in a public, and then the anti-cannabis people are always against it. I mean, Jeb Bradley is on record, and his famous thing now, his well-known thing is I can count. So he knows that, that there's enough people to support it. So the House has this thing, Nathaniel calls it Plan B, where they have these license agency stores. So it gets a little complicated, no pun, it's in the weeds. But the problem with the franchise agencies, anytime the state gets involved in a real way, you're subject to FTC, and you're subject to any sort of federal regulation. And if you're subject to federal regulation, it's not allowed, and as you know, it's a Schedule 3
right now
drug, and that's another thing, is that they
right.
could change it to Schedule 1, which would make it different. So Nathaniel says this is going to die in the Senate this time, because the pro-cannabis people actually are more confident that if it gets killed this time, it'll have a better shot next time, because of a couple of changes in the Senate, one of which is Jeb Bradley.
And potentially governor as well, since the Governor Sununu has played pretend on this for a long time, where I'm opposed, I'll support it, and he's switched back and forth, and he constantly throws enough barriers in place so that it can't make its way through the legislature. I'm going to veto it if you do this or if you do that. So he's just played games with it. The bottom line to me is in fact the bottom line. The fewer stores that are authorized, the more money each store will make. Makes sense. People are driven to those relatively small number. And 15 for the entire state of New Hampshire is a very small number. They can charge more money because people won't want to travel that much further. And so it's a more profitable business. And so they can make bigger donations to political candidates. And so this is a money machine for political candidates.
Yeah, and in fact, Nathaniel says, and it's going to be in his column, is that he calls them Senate toadies and so forth, but he says the governor has his fat cats who are donors, because if you, out of the 15, one individual or one company can own 3. So that means there could be 5 players in the whole market. And guess how many liquor stores are in New Hampshire?
I don't know.
67. Yeah. So 15 doesn't, I mean, we
and
drink a lot of liquor.
They're not right next door to all of us, are they? Some of us have to drive a little ways to get to a liquor store. The idea of having 15 cannabis stores, it demonstrates what a huge moneymaker it is, and how much they'll be available for donations to political candidates. The governor is going to rake up the money. I mentioned that about a month ago. I said I think that's what the key is for Governor Sununu, is to make sure he's got donations lined up for his next run for office, and this is one way for him to do it.
You think he's going to run for president next time?
Oh, he's running now for president. He was running the last time, when early on, in the hope that Trump would not be successful, that he would withdraw, or the field would open up and a non-Trump candidate might be serious. He was all ready to run, and Daddy told him not to, and Daddy runs his political career.
Is that true?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Big John.
If you go back to Big John Sununu, John Sununu was governor in the, let me think, late 70s, maybe 1980, early 80s. And he had two claims to fame. One is he deinstitutionalized Laconia State School, and he, under federal court order, he did a magnificent job. He was brilliant doing it. I was actively involved. I was working for Northern Human Services, and he did a terrific job. He was nasty, he was rude, he was foul-mouthed, but he got the job done, and he closed that place down, which was a great thing to close that down. And he did it cost-effectively. He did a wonderful job. And the other thing he did was create the highest electric rates in America for us by forcing the Seabrook nuclear power plant to go through. And that's where you see young Chris Sununu being so adamant about being against wood-fired power plants. Anything that might add a penny to the electric rates, that's what got his daddy beaten by Hugh Gallen, who ran against him and defeated him, a Democrat, which back then was amazing. He defeated Daddy Sununu because we were paying so much money in electric rates. He doubled our electric rates. And young Sununu recognized that's a pole he never wants to touch.
Well, he's also, and he's been accused every time, and it's whether it's correct or not, anytime he decides something about electricity, they always say, well, public service, he's in the pocket of public service, because one is that he was against the wood-burning plant, the biomass plant in Berlin, which was unpopular, but the truth is, and I'm a Berlin guy, is that it's probably not the most efficient thing in the world up there. And then net metering. He's always tough on net metering for solar people, and we have a solar system up here too. So,
I think it's a little bit more than that. I just think he is the most anti-environmental governor we've ever had, and since we've ever started talking about the environment, he's opposed any action to develop a real forward-looking environmental plan for the state. He's, as you said, opposed net metering. He's been the block stopping charging stations from getting built. He has stood in the way of everything except things like the wires, Northern Pass,
right.
And that sort of thing. And so in that sense, yeah, supportive of Eversource public service, but he's got the worst environmental record of any governor, certainly in the Northeast, and among the worst of any governor in the country, certainly the worst we've had.
I mean, he was so, and I realized that, you know, within intra-party, people are critical of each other, and then it's the big tent theory when you rally around. But boy, Trump is the exception of that, and there are still some Republicans who just can't stomach Trump. But boy, I have to admit, it shocked me, that, and Lindsey Graham can criticize Trump and then go back in the tent, but Chris was Sununu was so tough on him during the campaign, and now he's going to support him. Like, that is a bridge too far.
Yeah, and it wasn't just, gee, yeah, I might vote for him. It's I endorse him. Right. I am backing him. I want him to be successful. And yeah, the saps, the only way to describe them, the wimps, who, on a very cowardly basis, for their own political gain, feel the need to line up and check those boxes. And the same thing's true. It's probably worse with Trump, because you look at the outrageous things he's done and the kinds of things that Sununu has said about him, and he's basically going back on. But with the Democrats too, how many Democrats have stood on television and said, boy, when I'm all alone with Joe Biden, he's so sharp, he's so quick, he's right on top of things, and you just have to laugh out loud. It's embarrassing that these people have to say those kinds of things, knowing that it's nonsense. Well, why doesn't he come on television and look sharp and quick and capable? It's the political parties are the enemy of our country, and are dragging our country down. And it's this kind of party line pronouncements that are so shameful.
It is true, but you know, and this seems like maybe it's just a line in my mind, but it's one thing to say Joe Biden is good in public and good in private, but not in public. But that's different than saying that Trump is a menace to society. I mean, the stuff that that Sununu said about him is like, there's no way a person, I mean, you know, he knew what he was saying when he was saying it, but nobody says that about Biden.
If you believe Trump intentionally intended to overthrow the results of the 2020 election, and you can still support him, yeah, you have no credibility with me. That's the bridge too far. No matter how much you disagree on policy matters, you don't support someone who you believe has committed treason.
Yeah. Now Kelly Ayotte, who's running for governor,
Yeah.
she's already, I don't know about the word endorsement, but she's already supported
She's
Trump.
lined up, yeah,
Right.
yeah. And of course, her opponent in the primary has been all Trump all the time, Senator Morse, and I guess it's her effort to try not to lose those Trump supporters during the primary, and to win the primary by as much as she thinks she's going to win it, which is probably a lot, and to retain those voters when it comes time to elect a senator.
It's a political calculation, but I'm anxious to talk to Kelly. I mean, when she was senator, interviewed her a few times, and I was just always impressed with her. I think she's balanced and all that. I mean, she's conservative, but I just liked her, for lots of reasons. And I just think there's room. Like, I know it's a political calculation, but Chuck Morse, he's the guy behind the numbers type of guy, but he's not Mr. Personality, and that's been his criticism, right? The criticism about him. I just think there's room. I think Kelly could say, look, I can't, just say I can't endorse the guy. And I think she'd still be more successful because she would get crossover votes. And I think once you go to the Trump world, then it's tough to get a lot of the independents.
I talked to one person I know as a significant donor to Kelly Ayotte. He says, I'll never give her a penny.
Because of that.
Because of that. Who just says, I can't deal with somebody who rolls over for Trump like that.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go to, speaking of rolling over, I'm going to turn over my piece of paper here and talk about, what am I going to talk about? We're going to talk about the development. Yeah, I have another piece of paper, but it's not here. I brought the wrong one today. But anyway, so where do you want to start? And let me just start with the master plan in Conway. And I know you're a Madison guy, but boy, it is a tough one. There's a public hearing on the 23rd for the master plan, and the planning board's done a good job. But as you know, when the economy's good, we get planners who are anti-development. When the economy's in a tank, we get the pro-development type people. So we're in that arc now, but it does seem to be almost a bigger perspective because we've crushed with so much development. And you get these funny unintended consequences and inconsistencies where, that they did the 250-foot overlay on the north-south road. Did they know what could happen with the unintended consequences? Then all of a sudden you have Ashok Patel, who just bought the Red Jacket, and says, well, you just deprived me of the ability to build housing in back of the hotel where nobody could see it, so now I'm going to put it on the front lawn.
Yeah. Step back for a minute. What does Conway want to be when it grows up is what a master plan should try to address. And I think the two most telling numbers in the Mount Washington Valley, and I'm going to use Carroll County as the example, but it applies to Conway, very much to Conway. And that is, number one, the average wage of a person in Carroll County is the lowest in New Hampshire. There are 10 counties in New Hampshire, and Carroll County is the lowest wage, lower than Coos County, okay? So, and it's been that way for many years. In part because you've had the mills and other things up north and some union jobs and some high wages. But the lowest wages in all of New Hampshire are right here in Carroll County. And yet, of the 10 counties, Carroll County is third, and it varies a little bit from year to year, but is third in household income. And the reason is, which is crazy. I mean, how is that even arithmetically possible? And it's because the people who work here, who have jobs here in the Mount Washington Valley, get paid lousy. The pay levels are so low. And there are many people who live in the Mount Washington Valley who either move here with money and investments and stuff like that, or who work here but are paid by employers outside of the county. So when you compute household income, it's based on your income from wherever you work. And if you're a computer programmer sitting in your house working for somebody in Boston, then that's your income, and that drives up the wages. But if you are looking at wages for Carroll County, you're looking at what the jobs in Carroll County pay, and they're the worst in the state of New Hampshire. What does Conway want? And Conway has done two things that suppress wages, not on purpose, nobody's evil, but it's come out that way. One is we've become this very much tourism-driven economy, and tourism doesn't pay very well. And number two, we have become a destination for 1, 2, 3 day visitors, not for long-term visitors. And honestly, I'm probably going to offend somebody by saying this, but we attract the poorest tourists that New Hampshire attracts. The tourists who have more money go to Wolfboro. The tourists who have more money go to the Hanover area and elsewhere in the Lakes region and Squam Lake and all the rest of it. And we have devised an economy based on retail, based on some nice things for kids, Storyland and so on. These are attracting lower income families for whom a short trip up here is a big outing and is terrific, but where they're not spending a whole ton of money. And the result is hotels that are relatively inexpensive hotels, restaurants that are not fancy high-end restaurants, attractions that are not the most expensive attractions, although our ski areas attract people, but ours aren't the most expensive ski areas around. And so what do we want? Do we want to do what I used to see, which was try to attract technology businesses to the area, which would pay more? We used to attract some manufacturing. We still have the metalworking, the machine shops, Dearborn's kind of places, the green. Those pay perfectly fine. Are those things, that kinds of businesses, are they the kinds of industry that this valley
But how do you
wants?
go about, I mean, the Economic Council's been trying to do that forever. And, that's not easy. So now it's changed a little bit because we can have people who can work remotely, high-tech people. And you've experienced that with Echo Computer, obviously. Yeah. So, and it's not, like you say, it's not designed, but here we are right now. One is that one thing begets the other. I mean, we've had inexpensive attractions and inexpensive hotels, so we get those people, so then we get more hotels. Yeah. So, and then even down at the, at the dealing by across from Walmart there with that Continuum thing, we got a bank and now there's a Dunkin' Donuts, and we did a teletalk about expansion down East Conway, and of course everybody says, I don't want any more expansion. So meanwhile, you've got the town who's probably going to expand water and sewer down East Conway Road, and that's going to allow two things. Affordable housing, or more housing, because you can have apartment buildings on water and sewer, but of course you can go have with development too. So one is that how do you direct that if you want to change the image? I always kid to say that in the late 70s and 80s, when this used to be like a ski town, and it was the cops that changed it because they clamped down on DWIs because you couldn't get drunk and drive home anymore. And then we get this whole thing of the, after that, about being a family resort. So how do you, I mean, what are you suggesting we have more, like what do you suggest the planning board? I mean, the genie's out of the bottle for the most part.
Well, I think the intent to get the hotels and the stripping of 302 heading down through Redstone and into East Conway, I think the zoning board can create some restrictions that reduce the tackiness of that rollout and that spread. The number of things they can do, the planning board can do, are limited. I think the experience we had at Echo, for example, showed a lack of interest in technology businesses in the area. You had the town office, without telling us, announce publicly that our property would be stripped away from us, and that you'd have traffic running right outside the windows of a computer software company at the intersection there in Conway Village, where the 3 sets of lights all are. And there was just a lack of interest on the part of the town to work with us or to be encouraging of locations where the need for quiet was important, and the ability to perhaps zone for that kind of office space is one way to create an attraction or to protect an area in terms of quiet. Police department can contribute. Police department's always been good in Conway, by the way. I should emphasize that. They were very helpful. The encouragement by at least one of the selectmen of a skateboard park in our backyard, that kind of thing, was just stupid, and clearly an intent maybe it wasn't intent, maybe a result was that it made it a much less attractive location to try to run a technology-related business, or really any sort of office type business or any intellectual property kind of business where that kind of thing that kind of quiet work needs to be done. So I think you have to give that a little bit of thought, but I think part of it is restricting the areas in which the strip-like development can occur, and to encourage the development of suitable office space and locations that way. It requires the town to get active again with the Economic Council, for example, and bringing money into the area. Sorry, but one thing that really rubs me the wrong way, and if you read this Sunday's Manchester Union Leader, you saw it promoted, was the Army development down in Manchester, where the mills down there under Dean Kamen have been doing this regenerative biology stuff. So they're going to grow limbs and do other medical stuff. Super, great. And they brought in money to help fund that, really significant money. And there are hundreds of jobs there now, and probably getting into the thousands in the not too distant future. But our state legislature cut all these deals for them, said, well, you don't have to pay any taxes for years and years, decades. You don't, your employees don't have to pay back student loans if they went to state colleges in New Hampshire. We're just going to waive all that stuff. Not here in Conway, not in Keene, not in Claremont, not in Durham, but specific to a few square blocks in Manchester, where they got this incredibly rich package of goodies encouraging that kind of development. I don't think it should work like that. I don't think Conway should get it and others shouldn't get it. But if you're going to encourage STRs, which makes people who work from home have a problem, created a problem for me during during COVID. It was just so loud outside my house at times. It's fixed, but that was a significant problem for me working. You can't work when your neighbors are all STRs and are whooping it up all night long. It doesn't work. If you're a residential area and you're trying to work in your home office, you can't do it like that. I mean, I think just a basic sensitivity to the need for quiet, a basic sensitivity or an aggressiveness, maybe is a better word, to make sure the whole state benefits from these sweetheart deals that have been very narrowly distributed within the state. I think they have to be advocates. And the planning board is in a tough position to really be advocates, but they can make the spread more restrictive. They can really go to war against STRs in residential districts if they want to have and encourage other kinds of work in this area, and take being 10th in the state among 10 counties for wages as being unacceptable. Go to war.
Yeah, no, that's a very good points. And you know, I had a special article that I sponsored for short-term rentals and I got shut down, and so I may try it again this time with some tweaks in it that might be a little more favorable to people. But,
I'm sorry, education is another area where you're involved. Yeah. You can't attract people to this area who are going to make good livings working at home or starting technology businesses here if their kids aren't going to be able to go to not okay schools, but really good schools.
Right.
And our schools aren't getting the kind of support from our communities that they should. By not being a cooperative school district, you're saying to all the people in the surrounding towns, you have no say in your high school education, and for most of us, not for our junior high education. It's unacceptable. You can't attract people whose kids aren't going to be able to go to schools they have an opportunity to influence.
Yeah.
No,
well, it's a lot going on
to be done.
You know, and I haven't thought through this myself, but like, and the planning board is trying to limit development, right? And nobody likes the hotel that's right on the strip. So they're talking about, they're floating this idea of having like 40% green space on commercial thing. Well, I'm thinking, what are the unintended consequences of that? One is that if you can't put something decent size on a piece, it's going to kill the property value for one thing. So that's anybody who owns property, very few people on a strip. But what does that do? Does that just spread things out? I mean, it seems like the idea is that you want to, when you have development, you want to concentrate it. And the planning board has identified multi-use for the villages, but I think the strip and then going down East Conway Road is going to be that same thing. I mean, 40% green space. It sounds good, but there's not much left. Now, they're doing it also, I should say this, they're doing it also to stop some of the covering of the land, so this impervious surface, because it affects and that's a whole environmental, that's a whole different subject. Yeah. But still, it just seems as though on the strip, if you got 40% green space, what do you put on there? A couple of igloos?
Yeah, and I'm not competent, I don't think, to give you estimates that way, but I've worked with many organizations, many companies, and again, primarily technology companies that are in lovely little settings, set back from the main road, that are not terribly unlike the Economic Council's technology village. You have this, or you had this conflict between the school that was there and all. That's a whole nother issue, but it's true that the amount of subsidies and support for development that would encourage businesses like that to start here has collapsed, and the ability to attract those businesses has declined. And so, yeah, you don't have that great a need. It'd be great just to have the technology village and Jack Cuddy's properties back there all being fully developed and getting businesses back there that were the kind of things that were high-paying businesses.
But do you think, I mean, you're the perfect person to ask, because you were in that business and you established the biggest high-tech company probably in the area, right? Mm-hmm. Echo must have been, for sure, and or is, but you don't own it anymore. But it just seems like it's a tough slog. I was down in Greenville, South Carolina, where my son lives, and they got manufacturing all over the place. It's totally reasonable why they're in South Carolina. You got Charleston right there. You're centrally located. You get tons of people, a lot of space. So to think we're going to have some giant plant up here is not realistic.
No.
But high technology, then the same thing, in my view, applies to that. What technology company is going to come up, unless it's somebody who has a home up here or something, because you want to be near a university. You want to be near all other potential employees, right? But you did it.
People do have homes up here, and people want to live here. I lived up here, and a number of the people came here without having a business in place. Mike Larissy and Rapid Insight, the Emerlin business grew to be a nice-sized business that Calvin Hunsicker started, and he moved here without that business being in place. So people do want to live here, and people find this to be an attractive place to live. It is, I got to tell you, I know I haunt you about it, but the STRs are the absolute bane of doing that. That's a terrible situation. But the school system, I would say, would be the second most important factor, and the ability to sort of protect areas from that kind of overdeveloped strip type development, attracting hundreds and thousands of more low-paying tourist visitors is not what we need. How do you take the tourism part of the business and how do you goose it up? How do you make it a more attractive, higher-end destination? That's an interesting question. Not my specialty, but that's the sort of thing I would hope the Chamber of Commerce would be looking at and contributing during the master planning process. These small manufacturing places, the machine shop kinds of stuff, those are good jobs. They're more and more technologically challenging. How do we attract more of those? Should an area be carved out that's most appropriate for them? What are their water supply issues? I think they've got some interesting issues that I don't know much about. What are their electricity requirements? You can't have power go out for 4 days like I did during the last storm. So
but what about, it's a tough one, because, you talk about low tourists, not wealthy tourists, but Cranmore's put in those expensive condos. So now all the little condos that are near Cranmore are $1 million. Well, once that goes up, then everybody else's property goes up a little bit, right? The valuations go up, and then fewer people can afford the local housing. I think I said this before, but in Aspen, a single family, a one-room bedroom, long-term in downtown Aspen is $5,000 a month.
Well, and what are people getting paid who work at McDonald's if they have one in Aspen? It is a very difficult situation. The housing challenge, again, STRs, ban them, that fixes it overnight. But the housing challenge will continue to be a barrier. to people who aren't making a lot of money. So you're at a point where there's been a tremendous increase, and I'm just based on the ads in the back of the Sun for the hourly wages that people receive on the low end around here. So it used to be, I mean, 4 years ago, $11, right?
Right, now it's
9, 10, $11
20,
was
25.
pretty common. Exactly. I mean, not 5% or 10% more, but 50, 80, 100% more for some of those jobs. And is that going to be sustainable? And how is that going to change things? I don't know the answer. I think that we're in a state of change. This is an inflection point where things are going to be disrupted mightily. What's going to happen to those hotels if they're empty? What's going to happen to those hotels if they're full and they can't find employees to work them? And what happens to all the surrounding businesses that live off of those hotels? I think the retail is going to continue to look awfully good. I can't see why it wouldn't. You've got all these hotel rooms, and they're not going to be very expensive, so it's going to be an inexpensive day trip. I keep thinking we're going to keep attracting low-end tourists. Financially low-end tourists. They're wonderful people, but they're not going to have a lot of money to spend.
Right, except the ones over at Cranmore.
And that's an interesting question too. What will those prices be 5 years from now? I hope I'm around. I think I will be.
For the condos? Just the housing prices?
Yeah. What's going to happen to those when there are parties going on there at night, when they get rowdy? What's going to maintain them, keep them up at $1 million? Is Cranmore going to be able to invest? And again, changing weather patterns and everything. Yeah. Is Cranmore going to be such an attraction that they can force the price of those up as high as they've been? They're very nice. I was in one. The construction was terrific, but I don't know how they're going to maintain those prices, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you're right. We're in a very interesting transition point of one way or another. And I can remember back in the 2005 and 6 days, people would say, waiting for that crash. And it happened. Now, that's another subject, and we're in a different dynamic now because we don't have the bad mortgages and so forth. And a lot of these people are buying these condos, even the $1 million, $800,000, $900,000 condos in cash.
They're paying cash.
Yeah, so that's a whole different story.
So my question for the planning board is, who do you want to attract here? And then what do you have to do to attract those people, those businesses? Decide what you want.
But how do you, I mean, just specifically, we're going to have to wrap this up, but how do you, if the Dunkin' Donuts, like we need another Dunkin' Donuts, like we need another Dunkin' Donuts, right? That's going to go down by across from Walmart. I mean, how much coffee can people drink?
No,
do you drink coffee in the morning?
I don't.
I don't either.
Can't drink a cup of coffee, but you've got a whole high school full of kids. They need a Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay, I mean, but how do you stop? I mean, that to me, it's another Dunkin' Donuts. It's not a high-end something or other.
But that's what master plans are. They're zoning. You draw lines. It's Sim City. You draw lines on a map, and you say, you can put this here and you can't put that here. And that's what they have to decide. You can create the kinds of neighborhoods. You can create the kind of business development or at least restrict, but you can create the kind of business development and you can restrict the kind of business development that you want or that you don't want. And they have to draw the right lines on there, but only if they've got a rationale for it. What is it that they want to do? Who do they want to attract? If you want to attract a whole bunch of people who will work at the hotels and accept modest wages, then you know what kind of construction you need. You need low-cost housing for those individuals. Right. And that's what you're going to build. But if you do that, then you've created the momentum to continue the low-end income levels for this area and continue to motivate, continue to leave Carroll County at 10th among the 10 counties.
These are tough issues, and the planning board, they're doing I think they're doing an excellent job going in the right direction, but these are tough. I can remember in Portland, Munjoy Hill in Portland, used to be really, really working class, and it became gentrified over the last 10 years, and they were going to turn that into a historic district. So you would think, oh, that's great, we can protect the architecture and all that. The very, very liberal city council voted against it. And the reason is because once you're in this historical district, things get really expensive.
Yeah.
And it's going to push out people.
And you can't do some of the stuff you want. If I asked you to tell me who the planning board wants to attract with this master plan, could you tell me?
No.
So I don't think they're doing a good job, because that's the first question. I mean, you can't do a master plan unless you know who you want to attract to the community, who people-wise and who business-wise.
But I'm not sure the planning board's role is to figure out who you want to attract.
I think that's exactly what the planning board, that's what a master plan is. Okay, so we can disagree on
Okay,
that.
all right. George, you're cutting me out here. We're done, man. Usually I'm the one
No,
that
you got one more minute?
No, okay, 1 minute. We're already over.
RFK Jr.
Okay.
Tell
man,
me
your
what you've-
favorite,
tell
your
me what you've
favorite,
learned.
your favorite candidate, RFK Jr.
So you wrote this, I got to say, glowing
I thought I was
editorial.
impressed. You were
very impressed.
I was impressed with the guy. Not that I was going to vote for him, but I just thought he was just. I can't imagine being RFK Jr. I can't imagine being 8 years old and being a pallbearer for your uncle and then your dad and all that stuff. So I just think he's an incredibly complex, fascinating guy. Would I vote for him personally? No. Did he say anti-Semitic things? Yes. Does he have a dead brain, a dead worm in his brain? Apparently he does.
And has he hired a company in New York State to take petitions that would get his name on the ballot and fold over the top of those petitions, this is what he's doing, to hide his name and then put it in front of people, and the people who are paid to gather those signatures simply say, this is to try to make it easier for independents to get on the ballot. And they're gathering those signatures by the thousands, and he probably will be on the ballot in New York and changing in some way the outcome of the presidential election there with what is essentially fraudulent behavior. And there are a whole bunch of reports associated with that.
So who do you think is going to vote? Who do you think he's going to take away from, Biden or Trump?
I don't know. And the interesting thing is that he's attracting the kind of people that both Biden and Trump want to and need to attract. And I'm
for different
fascinated.
reasons.
For
Totally
well, for suspicion of government, for people who are generally white. They're generally, they're not just white, they're don't have college educations, they're white, Latino, and black, they're predominantly male. Those are the people that he's attracting, and both Biden and Trump want to attract those people, and it's hard to judge who's going to win or lose the most to RFK Jr. He is, of course, a conspiracy theorist fanatic. HIV doesn't cause AIDS. Vaccines are going to kill us all and give us all autism. I mean, he's wacko is okay with me. Dangerous wacko isn't okay. I don't have any sense of humor about the guy. He's killed people by discouraging people from taking vaccines. Read about him in American Samoa and his actions and behavior there and what happened and the measles epidemic that killed people there and his role in that. I mean, I don't have any sense of humor about the guy. He's a crook in the sense of trying to fraudulently get his name on ballots in different ways. And at the same time, the idea of an independent candidate who is being squeezed off of ballots because independents, it's so hard for them to get on because the two parties conspire to keep independents off the ballot. I mean, I have sympathy for him that way too, along with his childhood. But I think people should be aware that a vote, not just wasted, but a vote for a very dangerous guy.
Well, that's interesting. I would pay, though, to see the three of them on a debate stage.
I'd be fine with that.
Yeah,
That would be
that
great.
would be-
Absolutely. But I'd be fine with someone else on that debate stage who could read and write and was really aware, alert, and capable of expressing themselves clearly. So you have three people on there who are not capable of doing that, who are not intellectually capable of carrying on a real debate around the issues that face this country. And that's a shame. That ticks me off.
I don't know. I think that's a little harsh.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Robert Kennedy. I mean, you may not agree with him, but I think he's obviously very smart.
No. If you take the writings,
But he was an environmental lawyer forever. I mean, he championed all kinds of.
You don't know what he didn't do there, but that's the background that he had,
Right.
and then he went completely whack job, and started believing conspiracy theories about the murder of people, including his uncle.
Yeah.
The guy who was the doctor in Great Britain who came up with this thing about vaccines causing autism, who lost his license, who Nature magazine withdrew the publications because he falsified all the data in the thing, and he buys into all this stuff. That's not smart. being completely irresponsible and not following any science and having no competence to follow any science, that's not good. That's not healthy. That's Trump. And the fact that Biden can't hold his own in a debate and carry on a cogent conversation, even though behind closed doors he's really sharp as a tack. What a shame. What a shame. 300 plus million people in this country. Those are the three people we're going to see on that stage. Sure, throw in RFK Jr. That's fine with me, but that's such a low bar. Those are three people who shouldn't be ever in the presidency.
I think I've said this before, but I'm not a conspiracy. You know, I always think that the people who believe in UFOs, if you see a UFO, it's because you believe in one, right? That's the way I think about it. But man, there is a Rob Reiner, who's the old guy, not old guy, he's our age, but on All in the Family.
Yeah.
He's got this podcast on looking into JFK's assassination, 10 parts. I recommend anybody to listen to it. You will be convinced that it wasn't Oswald. You will be absolutely convinced. I mean, it's pretty compelling. And, and Robert Kennedy, when he was here, and I think I've probably mentioned this too when we had this discussion, like I'm sitting there talking to him, it's like, this is my once in a lifetime opportunity to ask him about his dad and ask him about his uncle. And he absolutely says I could prove it in court, and I believe him.
He has a whole array of conspiracy theories. If you want a conspiracy, if you want a questionable event, the assassination of JFK remains open to question. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that's another discussion. We're way over our time. We got to go. George, take care.
Thank you.
Okay.
Will do. Thank you. I think I have to go to